Yo, look, so we're getting drunk again and doing another political quiz. Now, this one is called 8values. The one I did before was the political compass test where I got piss faced off of raw vodka. You can watch that. For this video, I switched to Heineken because I literally cannot take it. Like, I almost died a few times from drinking. So I really narrowed it down to a few select drinks. You should be lucky I'm not drinking White Claw, but I do have my Jewel here to add a little residue of douche. Anyway, let's begin with the questions. I just want to let everyone know in this graphic here, I'm not going to display every question on the screen. I'm just going to read them out loud. But basically, the format is I'm going to read a statement that the test gives me, and the three choices are agree, disagree, or neutral. There's strongly agree and strongly disagree, but I don't really make a distinction. So, without further ado, let's begin. First statement. Oppression by corporations is more of a concern than oppression by governments. Well, it depends on the society, doesn't it? There's certainly been some situations where the governments have been more oppressive than the corporations because there were no corporations to speak of. That's called communism. But in our case, we happen to be oppressed by both. In fact, when people say we have a fully capitalist system, that's not entirely true. We still have a huge government that oppresses everyone. But then there's also the corporations who have teamed up with them. So it's really a double fist fuck, if you will. So I'm not so sure how to answer that. It depends on the situation. If we're talking about America, but then corporations, maybe by a slight margin, but honestly, it's really hard to tell. So, not sure. It is necessary for the government to intervene in the economy to protect consumers. That I agree with. By the way, if we're talking about the government, like a lot of Americans, when they think of government, they think of this boogeyman, fuck coming to take your money and shit, and that's all it does. It just throws it away. But that's because we haven't had adequate social programs to counteract that feeling of they're just coming to steal from you. So, in order for government to exist fairly and operate in a meaningful way, there has to be like it has to be really committed to the idea of democracy and utilitarianism. The freer the markets, the freer the people. Nope, that's billionaire horse shit. It is better to maintain a balanced budget than to ensure welfare for all citizens. Again, that's equating me with the government. I don't really give a fuck about the government, so to me, I'm gonna have to disagree with that one. I care more about the welfare of the people any fucking day. But that's just me. Publicly funded research is more beneficial to the people than leaving it to the market. I agree, because when you publicly fund something, there's a far better chance of it being accurate, because most people want to know science, but like, say you're doing a study on climate change, there have been multiple times when the market has interfered with that. When fossil fuel companies have said, oh, you can't show that, or we want you to come to this conclusion and we'll pay you millions of dollars. This has actually happened, and that's why our planet, or our ecosystem for the human species is in the place that it's in. It's in the shithole. Like, we're already too late on climate change. There's no, like, oh, 12 years, like Alexandria Cortez says. No, it's now. It's past now. Last call. We're done. We're done. Fuck. International trade is beneficial. I agree with that. From each according to his ability to each according to... This was in the last fucking test, too. And if you recall in that video, I mistakenly attributed this quote to John Locke, and I could not have been more inaccurate. This quote is actually from Karl Marx, but the thing is, I don't even know what the fuck it means. It's so poorly worded, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. Like, I mean, that kind of makes sense in a certain context, but in an economic context, it doesn't. So I'm not even sure what the fuck that's trying to say. I can't agree or disagree with that statement. It would be best if social programs were abolished in favor of private charity. Nope, that's what we have right now, and it sucks. Strongly disagree. Taxes should be increased on the rich to provide for the poor. Yes. No shit, Sherlock. Inheritance is a legitimate form of wealth. Well, sure it is. I mean, that's just a fact. It is wealth. If you inherit money from your parents, that is literally wealth, and you will have a legitimate advantage. There's no debating that. Public utilities like roads and electricity should be publicly owned. Yes. I think we should have free Wi-Fi. You know, Bernie's talking about bailout student debt, which I'm for, by the way, but then he talks about free college. And then I say, but do we really want to go to college? Because I dropped out of that shit. I knew it was horse shit, you know? So I think we can do better. Because everything I've learned, the reason I'm smarter than all the previous generations, and I think a lot of people my age can relate to that feeling, is because of the internet. It's because we have this valuable resource, and it has to be free. It has to be made universal, and I don't think it should be for profit. I really don't. Excessive government intervention is a threat to the economy. Well, of course it is. Excessive? What do you mean by excessive? But overall, I agree with that. Those with a greater ability to pay should receive better health care. Nope. That's one thing that should be equal across the board. Unless you're talking like plastic surgery or anything that comes into the like beauty and shit like that, just Hollywood bitches getting fucked up duck lips and shit. I don't give a fuck. Like, let them pay for that shit. But like if you have a heart attack, or if you get cancer, or you're in a legitimate medical situation, everybody should be equal. I agree with that. Quality education is a right of all people. Yes, absolutely. I clarified my position on that earlier. The means of production should belong to the workers who use them. I'm not sure what that means. Again, this is extremely vague wording. Should belong to the... I mean, I'm not a communist. I believe the business owner should have a real say over the company. But, you know, so should the workers. I think there needs to be a real reckoning between the two parties. Like, especially when you're dealing with mega corporations like Amazon and, you know, all these corporations that are paying zero in taxes. That's absolutely unacceptable. I think the vast majority of Americans, whether they know it or not, agree with that sentiment. So I'm not sure about that one. The United Nations should be abolished. No. You can argue whether or not it should be reformed, but I think it was a good idea. Military action by our nation is often necessary to protect it. Not so much anymore. I disagree with that. Definitely the case back then, but now we have nukes and shit. I just don't think it's a good strategy. And Tulsi Gabbard, by the way, running for president, she's really good at explaining that and standing up for peace and all that. I support regional unions, such as the European Union. I'm not a European, so I'm not at liberty to say whether or not I support that. In its current state, I have no fucking idea what their politics are. Gotta be honest. I'm interested to find out, though, but I can't comment on that. It is important to maintain our national sovereignty. Again, what the fuck does this mean? National sovereignty? Like what? We're not going to be a country anymore? We're a country. We're the most powerful country on earth, the United States. There's no question about it. Like, I don't see where this argument comes in where we need to defend. Like, what is there to fucking defend? In the first place, borders are just imaginary. We know this. It's a fact. Secondly, sovereignty, does that mean separate from everybody? What does that have to do with trade? What does that have to do with anything? Bullshit. I'm not sure about that. A united world government would be beneficial to mankind. Yeah, sure. It is more important to retain peaceful relations than to further our strength. I would argue they're the same thing. Not sure. Wars do not need to be justified to other countries. Well, I mean, dude, isn't... Okay, this questionnaire is actually retarded. Like, the whole point of a war... Like, have you ever seen a war where it's just like... It's like, oh, we're gonna explain to you... No, it's a war, faggot. Get strapped. Do they need to be justified? I don't know, dude. I don't know. Should we be in wars? Probably not. I mean, do they serve a purpose? Sure. It keeps the population in check. That I'm definitely for. I don't know. Fucking disagree. Military spending is a waste of money. Agree. International aid is a waste of money. Sadly, I agree with this too, because we give Israel billions of dollars for no fucking reason. We give Africa billions of dollars, even though they're actually starving. It's not going to the right people, because you got militias and shit blocking the foreign aid, and it's just so fucked. Like, why should we be the ones responsible? Why should my tax dollars be carrying this heavy burden of feeding the world's poor or helping out this and that country? This shouldn't happen, but it does, and it does to an extremely regrettable extent. My nation is great. Fuck you. Disagree. Strongly disagree. Research should be conducted on an international scale. Agree. Governments should be accountable to the international community. Agree. Even when protesting an authoritarian government, violence is not acceptable. Well, how do you know they're not enacting violence against you? I'm sure, like, it depends on the situation. Again, totally vague question. Neutral. My religious values should be spread as much as possible. I have no religious values. Disagree. Our nation's values should be spread as much as possible. Yeah, what are those? What the fuck are our nation's values? Do we even have any? Does America have any values at this point? Because it seems like it doesn't from the looks of it. I don't even know how to answer that shit. It is very important to maintain law and order. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I gotta disagree. The general populace makes poor decisions. Well, ain't that a fact? Victimless crimes, such as drug use, should not be crimes at all. No shit. The sacrifice of some civil liberties is necessary to protect us from acts of terrorism. Yeah, that's bullshit. That's government propaganda, and everybody needs to know that. Government surveillance is necessary in the modern world. Same shit. The very existence of the state is a threat to our liberty. Again, what do you mean by the state? The government is only as good as its people. It's only as good as the people who are responsible for keeping it in check. That's the whole point of a democracy, is that you're supposed to keep your government in check, but we haven't been doing that, clearly. So I don't think it's the state's fault necessarily. I think the state is a reflection of us, in a way. How, we're fiscally irresponsible. We're plunderers and rapists, and I mean, that's what America is, man. So I'm not, again, terrible question. I can't agree or disagree. Regardless of political opinions, it is important to side with your country. Wrong. More propaganda. No authority should be left unquestioned. Strongly agree. That is healthy thinking. A hierarchical state is best. I mean, when has there not been a hierarchical state? There has never, name one time there hasn't been a hierarchy in the world. I mean, I guess it is the best since, there's nothing else to go by. It is important that the government follows the majority of opinion, even if it is wrong. Again, this is the idea of democracy. What is it? How do we define it? I think the people get what they deserve in the end, so I'm going to have to slightly agree with this. The stronger the leadership, the better. Well, what does strong mean? What does strong mean? Because you just take a look at our current president. Nobody's going to argue that he's a weak-willed individual. Nobody's going to argue that. Love him or hate him. On both sides, you cannot argue that he's weak-willed. He will have his way, or he's going to bomb the shit out of somebody. I mean, he said it. So I don't think strength is necessarily for the better. I'm going to have to disagree. Democracy is more than a decision-making process. Dude, this is literally retarded. I'm not answering this one. Environmental regulations are essential. Agree. About fucking time. A better world will come from automation, science, and technology. I'm not a crystal lady. I can't say. Children should be educated in religious or traditional values. Bullshit. Disagree. Traditions are of no value on their own. Agree. We give them value. Religion should play a role in government. Strongly disagree. That's not how it's supposed to fucking be. Churches should be taxed the same way other institutions are taxed. Fuck yes. Climate change is currently one of the greatest threats to our way of life. Pretty much a fact. There's no debating it. It is important that we work as a united world to combat climate change. Well, it's certainly important. Do you give a shit? I don't really, but it's certainly important. Society was better many years ago than it is now. It depends on what year you're fucking talking about and what situations. How am I going to answer this? It's all relative. I can't agree or disagree. It is important that we maintain the traditions of our past. Nope. It is important that we think in the long term, beyond our lifespans. I think it's a good way to think, honestly. Agree. Reason is more important than maintaining our culture. There's certainly a lot of things that I like about maintaining a culture, like, food, music, art. And in a way, you could make the argument that all these stale PC Hollywood movies have helped destroy our culture, and I'd agree with that. But reason ultimately is more important because any reasonable person would maintain the good things about the culture anyway and do away with the bad. Drug use should be legalized or decriminalized. Yes, same-sex marriage should be legal. It is legal, and yes. No cultures are superior to others. Bullshit. We know that's not true. Sex outside marriage is immoral. Bullshit. If we accept migrants at all, it is important that they assimilate into our culture. Well, they're gonna have to. I don't see what choice they have. Agree. Abortion should be prohibited in most or all cases. Bull fucking shit. Gun ownership should be prohibited for those without a valid reason. I don't agree with this. I used to be pro-gun control, and now I've shifted firmly to the right on that, mainly because of my anarchist leanings, and also because I don't trust the government in its current state at all. I support single-payer universal health care. Absolutely. And this again comes into the hypothetical question of the government. And I would argue that we need to displace big government with democracy. And that ultimately would change the government, ideally, so that you could have universal health care. But when you talk about health care, what other way is there? It has to be universal, otherwise people are going to fucking die. And they are. So don't give me this bullshit we can't afford it when every other legitimate country fucking has it. Prostitution should be illegal. Nope. I've had a hooker. I think it's a great enterprise. Maintaining family values is essential. Nope. To chase progress at all costs is dangerous. Not sure how to answer this. No clarification again. Genetic modification is a force for good, even on humans. I'd be hesitant about that, but again, I'm not a scientist. I can't be sure. We should open our borders to immigration. Yes, sure. Governments should be as concerned about foreign citizens as they are about those within their borders. No, why would they be? That doesn't make any fucking sense. Then why have nations at all? All people, regardless of factors like culture or sexuality, should be treated equally. Yeah. It is important that we further my group's goals above all others. Well, I don't have a group, so I'm going to have to disagree with that. And here we are. Here are the results. Okay, economic access versus social. It seems like, yeah, I'm at 67% equality and 32% markets, which means I favor equality slightly more. Diplomatic access, they're calling me peaceful. So the world is more important than the nation. On the civil axis, libertarian, I'm more for liberty, 8-2. And society, very progressive. I'm more for progress than for tradition. It's true, I do hate tradition. So, overall, they label me a social libertarian. And there you have it, folks.